Imagine waking up to witness your family's century-old barn, an iconic symbol of American grit, collapse dramatically only to uncover a hidden government vault beneath your feet. Elijah Cooper faced exactly this scenario, stumbling onto mysterious, potentially world-changing secrets dating back to World War I. Confronted by shadowy government agents, groundbreaking inventions, and classified medical miracles, Elijah and his daughter Hannah must navigate dangerous territory where history, family honor, and patriotism collide. But can an ordinary American farmer protect his heritage while guarding a secret capable of reshaping the nation? Stay tuned, because the truth is more astonishing and dangerous than you can imagine. If you're fascinated by untold American stories, secret discoveries, and heroes who rise from unlikely places, don't forget to subscribe now. This incredible saga is just beginning. Elijah Cooper had spent his entire life on the same patch of rural Vermont land that his great-grandfather Charles Cooper had purchased in 1923. He was the fourth generation of Coopers to work this soil, which sprawled across 80 rolling acres in the heart of the Green Mountain State. The homestead had once been the pride of the county, with its splendid apple orchards and an imposing Victorian-style farmhouse perched on a gentle rise and painted a warm shade of burgundy that had faded gracefully with time. Locals knew the place simply as Cooper Farm, a long-standing testament to perseverance, family ties, and the region's rich agricultural heritage. In its heyday, Cooper Farm had been bustling with activity. During harvest season, caravans of visitors would come from neighboring counties, and even from as far as New York, to pick apples, enjoy freshly baked cider donuts, and tour the century-old structures that dotted the property. The centerpiece was always the old barn, a towering edifice of weathered timber and shingled roof thought to date back to the pre-Civil War era. Over its lifetime, this barn had sheltered everything from dairy cows to prize-winning horses. It had survived storms, fires, and the punishing New England winters, standing tall as a symbol of the Coopers' enduring resolve. But times had changed. By the time Elijah took over operations from his aging father, Henry Cooper, a harsh new reality set in for small, family-owned farms. Industrial agriculture had advanced at a breakneck pace, pushing down the price of apples and other produce to levels that made profitability a constant struggle. Competition was fierce, and Cooper Farm no longer commanded the wide recognition it once did. Instead of caravans of visitors, the property now saw only the occasional curious tourist or dedicated local who remembered the farm from its golden days. Maintaining the farm's aging infrastructure proved to be an even tougher challenge. The old Victorian farmhouse required endless upkeep. Pipes leaked, the foundation cracked, and heating bills soared each winter. Yet the barn caused Elijah the most worry. Its sagging beams, leaning walls, and drafty gaps served as a daily reminder that it might not withstand another season of harsh weather. Every creak and groan when the wind blew across its boards made him flinch. Contractors had quoted astronomical sums for a complete renovation, figures so high that Elijah wondered if he'd be better off tearing the barn down entirely. But letting go of such a precious piece of his family's past felt akin to betraying the legacy Charles Cooper had started, especially given how that legacy defined Elijah's entire identity. Financial woes added to the stress. Loan officers gave him skeptical looks whenever he asked about financing. Farm equipment, vital for modernization, was prohibitively expensive, and Elijah had already sold off half his livestock. Fewer animals meant fewer farmhands. He was forced to let go of seasonal workers who had once felt like part of the family. Despite every obstacle, Elijah resisted giving up, waking each morning before sunrise to tend to the land. He felt an unspoken bond with the soil, believing that quitting would dishonor not only his ancestors, but also the spirit of rural America. Yet in the pit of his stomach, a deep unease warned him that time was running out. Little did he know that fate had a dramatic turn in store for him, one that would shift his sense of responsibility and uncover a long-buried secret beneath the very structure he feared might crumble to dust. Before the storms of modern life fully bore down on him, Elijah remembered a childhood brimming with promise. The barn was the epicenter of his youthful adventures. He and his younger sister Grace would climb the hay bales, invent elaborate games with the barn cats, and lose themselves in the musky scent of timber beams, perfumed by decades of animal feed and dusty straw. Summers felt endless. Orchard trees heavy with bright, crisp apples. Macintosh Empire and Honeycrisp filling the air with an intoxicating sweetness. Farmhands laughed and swapped stories with one another, forming a tight-knit community that supported the Coopers, season after season. His father, Henry Cooper, had taken great pride in carrying on their family tradition. He introduced newer apple varieties, tested novel methods of pest control, and even flirted with early concepts of organic farming. Through the 1980s and 1990s, Cooper Farm competed fiercely in local markets and managed to stay profitable, even as agricultural trends shifted. Elijah, watching his father's diligence, internalized a clear sense of mission stewardship over land and heritage. He learned not just about sowing, pruning, and harvesting, but also about perseverance, adaptability, and reverence for the older ways of doing things. Then the new millennium arrived, bringing a surge in corporate agriculture. Monolithic farm operations absorbed massive tracts of land, producing apples and other produce, at a scale family farms couldn't match. Prices dropped, profit margins vanished. Co-ops merged or folded, leaving the Coopers with fewer bargaining chips when dealing with wholesalers. Elijah learned the hard way that simply working harder wasn't enough to stave off mounting debts. Even the orchard's prolific harvest could no longer generate the revenue they once had, not when corporate giants funneled produce into supermarkets at rock-bottom prices. Elijah tried to adapt. He pivoted to organic vegetables and started a small roadside stand selling jam ciders and an assortment of homemade baked goods. This helped, but it was far from enough. Then came the question of upkeep. The Victorian farmhouse leaned toward needing a full restoration. Its roof tiles were loose, the front porch steps creaked ominously with each footfall, and the paint peeled in strips during the humid summers. Every big project demanded money, which was in short supply. The barn, structurally precarious, though it might be symbolized the very soul of the Cooper clan's journey, tearing it down felt akin to tearing a page from history. Adding to Elijah's emotional burden was the future of his only child, Hannah Cooper. Now away at a university out of state, she was studying agricultural science. She dreamed of coming home one day and leading a renaissance at Cooper Farm, armed with new techniques to fortify both orchard yields and soil health. Though the thought warmed Elijah's heart, he couldn't ignore a pang of guilt. Returning to a struggling farm might condemn her to the same treadmill of financial worries he had endured. Would it be fair to pass on an indebted property rather than a flourishing family business? A sense of desperation sometimes gnawed at Elijah. Yet beneath that desperation was determination. There had to be a way to resurrect Cooper Farm. The question was how. Every time he walked past that aging barn, he felt both love and dread in equal measure. The boards, once echoing with the laughter of his childhood, now moaned a grim warning in the wind. If something dramatic didn't change soon, he feared the entire place might collapse, both literally and metaphorically, under the weight of financial strain and generational expectations. On October 20th, well into Vermont's crisp autumn, the forecast warned of an unusually powerful storm front rolling in. Elijah had heard local weather reports cautioning residents to brace for high winds and torrential rains. Though such storms weren't unheard of in the region, the meteorologists spoke of record gusts that could uproot trees and tear shingles off rooftops. Alarmed, Elijah spent the preceding day securing loose equipment, tying down tarps, and making hurried repairs wherever possible. But the barn loomed large in his mind. If strong winds got hold of its aging frame, the damage could be catastrophic. That morning, he woke before the sun, compelled by a restless urgency. The sky was already a muddled gray, thick with clouds that roiled and drifted swiftly across the horizon. A steady wind rattled the farmhouse windows. When he stepped outside, the air felt electric, the final calm before a storm's fury. Overhead crows wheeled anxiously, their caws sharper than usual. Elijah's boots crunched on the gravel path as he hustled toward the barn to inspect its structural braces for what felt like the 100th time in the past month. Inside the barn, dust motes swirled in slender beams of early light that pierced through cracks in the walls. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual, as though the ancient timbers themselves sensed what was coming. Elijah took mental inventory. Some older tractor attachments, a few bales of hay, and a set of tools he hadn't bothered moving yet. He made a snap decision to relocate the most valuable equipment to a smaller, sturdier shed nearby. Better safe than sorry, he thought grimly. By mid-morning, the wind had picked up dramatically. Branches thrashed in the orchard, and the air carried an icy edge, hinting that the storm's center was still on its way. Elijah sprinted back and forth, loading smaller implements into a pickup, straining to do what he could against Mother Nature's impending fury. Then, in the space of just a few moments, the wind shifted violently, slamming into the barn's western wall with a force that felt almost personal. Above him, the rafters groaned in a nerve-jangling protest. Suddenly, a sharp crack rang out like a rifle shot, ricocheting through the hollow wooden structure. One of the main support beams buckled. Elijah's heart shot into his throat as he watched the sagging roofline begin to give. He could do nothing but scramble out of the door, adrenaline rushing, choking on sawdust and debris. With a deafening roar, the barn imploded inward, sending up a massive plume of dust. Broken planks clattered against each other in a storm of splinters, and a rumbling avalanche of timber crashed to the ground in a heap. He stood at the threshold of the barn's large entrance, momentarily stunned. His family's barn shelter, to countless Cooper's livestock, and memories for over a century now lay flattened. Tears stung his eyes as if the collapse were a living wound. It felt like watching the final nail driven into the coffin of his family legacy. Yet even amid that heartbreak, something at the corner of Elijah's vision caught his attention. Amid the twisted wreckage and broken boards, a gleam of metal winked at him in the dim light. He blinked, trying to clear the dust and confusion from his eyes. Slowly he approached the glint, weaving around fallen beams and tangles of old wire. The metallic shine came from something beneath what had once been the barn's wooden flooring. Elijah knelt, hands trembling, brushing away splinters. What he saw next would forever reframe his understanding of Cooper Farm and his entire life. Elijah found himself staring at a hidden hatch large and made of heavy steel, its surface pitted with age yet curiously intact. It was maybe 8 feet across on each side, seamlessly set into a concrete lip. A strange locking mechanism rusted in places. Guarded it, he ran his fingers over the embossed lettering on the metal, a date and a partial serial number that he couldn't quite decipher. He had heard enough old family stories to know his great-grandfather Charles Cooper had occasionally worked odd jobs for the local government during the 1920s, but no one had ever mentioned a secret sealed away beneath the barn. Rain now pelted down in earnest, rattling against the collapsed timbers. Elijah quickly retrieved his phone, snapping a series of photographs. His breath caught in his throat as he zoomed in on the hatch's faint markings. The year 1924 stood out clearly, along with warning labels he could only partially read. This wasn't just a random storm shelter or a root cellar. Something official, something big had been installed beneath Cooper Farm a century ago, and no one in the family had spoken of it since. As the intensity of the storm grew, Elijah's heart pounded with a mix of exhilaration and dread. The wind whipped at his clothes, and rainwater trickled under his jacket collar, but he refused to leave this discovery uninvestigated. Gritting his teeth, he dashed to his workshop, a smaller structure that still stood upright. There he rummaged through old coffee cans of nails, wrenches, and dusty tools until he found a sturdy crowbar and several flashlights. The metal hatch could be his lifeline or a can of worms. Hurrying back through the downpour, he pried at the hatch's lock. The metal screeched in protest, decades of corrosion grudgingly giving way. Eventually, the locking mechanism snapped and the hatch's handle turned with surprising ease. Elijah paused to steady himself, sensing in his gut that once he opened this door, he would be plunging headfirst into a secret that could redefine everything he knew about his family's past. Still, the tug of curiosity was irresistible. Lifting the heavy metal lid, he peered down into what looked like a staircase vanishing into a dark void. His flashlight's beam traced each concrete step, revealing no signs of water, seepage, or mildew. The air that rushed out smelled stale and metallic, oddly cool despite the raging storm above. Inch by inch, Elijah descended. With every step, the swirling wind and rain outside grew fainter until he was alone in near silence, punctuated only by the echo of his own careful footfalls. At the bottom of the staircase, his flashlight illuminated a vast underground chamber. He stood slack-jawed, unable to process the sight. Fully tall walls of poured concrete, heavy steel ceiling supports, and row upon row of wooden crates, stacked high. Tables, chairs, and shelving units lined the room, all covered in a thick layer of dust, as if sealed in a time capsule from a forgotten era. The hush felt unnatural. It was as though this subterranean vault had been waiting untouched by time and storms alike for Elijah to uncover its mystery. The adrenaline pounding in Elijah's veins kept him from feeling the chill that crept through the underground chamber. His flashlight flickered across the crates, each bearing faded stencils with official-sounding labels. Property of U.S. Government Medical Supplies, project documentation and dates referencing the early 1920s. The atmosphere felt strangely solemn, as though he had stepped into a museum exhibit that no one had ever visited. The hush seemed to amplify the sound of his own breathing, and the metallic tang in the air grew more pronounced as he moved further in. Approaching one of the nearest crates, he brushed away layers of dust, squinting at a nearly illegible inscription. Edging the crowbar carefully, he pried open the lid with a soft crack of splitting wood. Inside, nestled in straw packing, were dozens of small glass vials, small. Their contents were colorful liquids, some brilliantly clear, others cloudy or sediment-laden. Each vial bore a faint label, though time had rendered much of the text unreadable. A few still had discernible words like antitoxin, experimental, and handled with caution. Elijah's stomach did a flip. These were not the sorts of items one would expect to find below a family barn. Curiosity driving him on, he opened another crate. This one contained stacks of yellow documents bound with brittle twine. The top document bore a government seal and read Operation Filament. Eyes only. He lifted it, scanning the typed text. Though smudged, he could make out references to advanced medical research, post-World War I medical trials, and hush-hush collaborations between scientists and military officials. The deeper he read, the more outlandish the details seemed. Talks of revolutionary treatments that had never seen the light of day, as if the entire project had vanished without official recognition. His pulse hammered against his temples as the weight of the discovery sank in. This wasn't simply a hidden cellar stocked with old supplies. It was a concealed time capsule containing government-classified science from the early 20th century. But why Cooper Farm? His ancestors had been simple farmers, or so he'd always believed. Could his great-grandfather, Charles Cooper, have participated in secret wartime research? It seemed impossible. Yet the evidence was right here. Elijah recognized a slow-mounting anxiety. If these were still considered government property, was he trespassing on classified ground? Would he be in legal jeopardy for opening crates labeled property of U.S.? Government bolstered by the thick hush, Elijah pressed on. He turned to a set of shelves lined with thick ledgers, each penned in a neat, spidery hand. The spines held references to experiments, orchard yield logs, and ledgers of unusual chemicals. He grabbed one and found a date on the first page, 1924. Right beside the date was the name Charles Cooper. Page after page revealed intricate details, scientific formulas scrawled between what looked like orchard cycle updates, remarks about local weather, and personal diary entries. The seamless blend of science and agriculture suggested that Charles Cooper had somehow combined advanced research with farm operations. As Elijah pored over the details, his phone's flashlight dimmed to a sliver of light. Hours must have passed the world above, no doubt still enduring the storm. He realized with a jolt of alarm that the vault's existence was far bigger than just a family secret. It held potential ramifications for national history, maybe even the entire realm of modern science. The question now burning in his mind was, who owned all this, and did the government still consider it active? Perhaps more pressing, was any of this dangerous? Gathering his courage, he turned back toward the staircase. Rain still pounded outside, but he needed to regroup, maybe call someone he trusted. In his pocket, his phone buzzed and the screen lit up with a text from his daughter, Hannah. She was checking on him, worried about the storm. Elijah sighed, steadied himself, and typed back with trembling fingers. Found something unbelievable under the barn. Need your help. Please come home. Don't tell anyone yet. The ramifications of that text weighed heavily on his chest like a loaded secret, pressing down, unstoppable and urgent. By the next morning, word of the barn's collapse had spread through the small Vermont community. Neighbors drove by gawking at the rubble, offering condolences or snapping photos. Many had grown up with their own memories of the barn, 4-H events, harvest festivals, or visits to marvel at one of the oldest rural structures still standing. Martha Billings, who lived half a mile down the road, insisted Elijah accept help from her sons to clear the wreckage. Faced with her neighborly concern, Elijah contrived an excuse: he needed to wait for an insurance adjuster, plus he wanted to handle the debris carefully to salvage any possible materials. Privately, he dreaded that an eager volunteer could stumble on the hatch, blowing the entire situation wide open before he was ready to deal with it. In truth, Elijah spent most of that day darting discreetly between the rubble and his workshop. He'd grab a spare moment to descend into the vault using his phone's camera to document crates and shelf contents more thoroughly. Despite the storm's severity, the subterranean chamber had remained perfectly dry. Interestingly, the site didn't appear to have any serious structural damage from above, aside from a few dislodged boards resting on the sealed metal entrance. This further convinced him that the place had been built to exacting standards, suggesting more than a simple private project by a curious farmer. As he moved about the collapsed barn in the farmyard, Elijah felt a prickling paranoia. Each time a car slowed near the property, he wondered if it might be a government agent, When the local historical society's self-appointed expert, Walter Wright, showed up unannounced, Elijah felt his heart race. Walter, brandishing a camera and notepad, proclaimed that the barn was a priceless piece of state heritage, insisting that a thorough cataloging of the wreckage was required, yet to allow that might mean exposing the hatch, or the sign of a concealed basement. So Elijah feigned cooperation, hoping that the day's muddy conditions would keep Walter from digging too deeply. Eventually, a steady downpour returned, forcing Walter to retreat. Each moment of solitude spurred Elijah to investigate the vault further. He realized the medicinal compounds and vials he'd found could be historically priceless and possibly scientifically relevant even today. Who else knew about them? Were there more items of equal or greater significance hidden deeper? His great-grandfather's diary entries were cryptic, full of references to ensuring security, active experimentation, and dangerous if mishandled. The more Elijah read, the more convinced he became that Charles Cooper had served as a guardian, not merely a caretaker for a trove of clandestine government research from World War I and its aftermath. The tension gnawed at him. What if the government still had a claim on this property? And if so, did they have reason to keep it hidden? The repeated warnings in the diaries about dire consequences if discovered prematurely made the threat feel more tangible. Could it be that certain parties had been waiting all these decades for an excuse to retrieve what lay beneath the Cooper farm? A swirl of conflicting emotions, excitement over a potential windfall, fear of legal repercussions, and an almost childlike awe at the vault's relics kept Elijah on edge. Checking his phone again, he noted Hannah's quick replies. "I'll be home soon. Dad, just hold on." That single promise became his lifeline. He could trust her judgment. She was the only person he could confide in without reservation about the magnitude of what might be happening beneath their very feet. Hannah Cooper arrived 2 days sooner than planned, her car rattling up the gravel driveway, while a subdued afternoon sun cast shadows across the collapsed barn. She stepped out wearing hiking boots and a thick jacket, her expression etched with concern. Her usual demeanor, bright-eyed enthusiasm and easy laughter, seemed tempered by worry. Though she was only a junior in college, Hannah had grown up around scientific ideas, and her experiences at school had sharpened her analytical mind. Elijah breathed a sigh of relief when he saw her feeling less alone in this bizarre unfolding mystery. He wasted no time leading her first to the barn site. Hannah stood quietly at the perimeter of the wreckage, shaking her head in disbelief. "I can't believe it's gone," she murmured. "That barn's been the backdrop to every family photo since I was a kid." Her lament was short-lived, however, as Elijah guided her to the concealed hatch. Once she set eyes on the metal door and peered down the concrete steps, Hannah's questions came in a rush. How had no one in the family discovered this before? Why was it locked? Why was there seemingly a classified government stash under a Vermont farm? Minutes later, father and daughter stood together in the underground chamber, their flashlights roving across crates and shelves in tandem. Hannah let out a hushed whistle, eyes widening at the stockpile of decades-old scientific apparatus and medical vials. "This looks like something out of a historical documentary," she remarked, "but it's so well preserved. My professors would flip if they saw this." Elijah explained everything he'd pieced together so far. References to post-World War I research, cryptic notes from Charles Cooper, and the possibility that these discoveries could have immense historical and even financial value. Hannah perused a partially open file labeled Project Halo, confidential. Her brows knit with alarm as she read about an experimental antibiotic tested in 1922. The text described an unusually broad effectiveness against bacterial strains that had threatened troops during the war. How could they have developed this, then, she marveled. That would have been revolutionary, potentially world-changing, especially before penicillin was mainstream. Why was it never announced? The question hung in the stale air, pointing to deeper layers of intrigue. They found more diaries and personal notes signed to Cooper, describing hush-hush collaborations with the U.S. Department of Special Projects. The diaries hinted at concerns over militarization of scientific findings. Charles had written a poignant line: "If these compounds fall into the wrong hands, the cost could be beyond measure. I must safeguard them until the time is right." Both Hannah and Elijah felt a strange kinship with this long-dead ancestor, whose voice was echoing from a century ago, urging them to continue his guardianship. Hannah insisted they proceed systematically. They should photograph and catalog each crate and item carefully. She suggested that revealing their discovery publicly, at least without legal advice, would be risky. Elijah nodded, relieved that she was on the same page. Together, they formed a plan they would collect as much information as they could verify that there was no immediate danger, biological or radioactive, and then decide how to approach authorities or historians. The excitement was palpable. This might be the rescue Cooper Farm desperately needed if handled correctly. Yet beneath the excitement, worry gnawed at them. If this was truly top-secret material, how long before somebody with considerable power and resources showed up to take it all away? Their suspicions proved warranted sooner than either anticipated. 4 nights after Hannah returned, the farm lay quiet under a moonless sky. Elijah and Hannah had spent the day meticulously inventorying artifacts in the vault, double-checking any sign of instability or dangerous substances. Exhausted, they retired to the farmhouse, overshadowed by the collapsed barn silhouette. A hush settled over Cooper Farm, broken only by the gentle chirp of crickets. Around midnight, Elijah awoke to a barely discernible rumble of engines, vehicles rolling over gravel at low speed. His heart thumped. Who would come by at this hour unannounced with headlights off? He hurriedly grabbed a flashlight and roused Hannah. Together, they peered from the upstairs window to see 2 dark SUVs parked near the barn wreckage. Shadowy figures moved with calculated efficiency as if searching for something. This wasn't a random group of teenagers, nor was it a salvage crew. Their bearing reeked of professional intent. Suddenly, a muted beam of light swept across the wreckage. One of the figures crouched down, shining a portable device near the hatch. Even from a distance, Hannah recognized the shape of a Geiger counter. Alarm coursed through her. "Why would they be checking for radiation?" she whispered. Elijah had no immediate answer, but a deep unease took hold of him. If these intruders already suspected something about hidden research materials, it might mean the government, or worse, an unrecognized private group had knowledge of the vault's contents. They crept downstairs in the darkness, trying not to draw attention. Outside, the hush amplified the crunch of footsteps on rubble. Hannah felt a surge of fear for the historical trove beneath their feet. If these people were here to claim or destroy the evidence, centuries of careful secret-keeping could vanish overnight. Through a gap in the collapsed boards, the intruders found the hatch handle. The device in one of their hands beeped steadily. Elijah and Hannah positioned themselves behind a half-broken wall of the barn, hearts pounding loud enough that they worried the sound might carry. One intruder spoke, voice low but audible. "I'm reading significant traces, possibly from an early radioactive material or experimental isotopes. We need full containment protocols." Another responded, "Central wants us to confirm if it's what they think we lock this place down." A surge of protectiveness overcame Elijah. The notion that unscrupulous agents might seize or dismantle the vault made his blood run cold. Desperation fueling his bravery, he rose to confront them, only to be met by the glare of a flashlight in his eyes. "Hold it right there," barked a man clad in a black tactical vest, face masked. An ominous silence followed, broken by the faint crackle of radio static. Hannah emerged at her father's side, trembling, yet resolute. She was about to speak when a commanding voice cut through the tension. "Stand down, all of you." In the faint glow of flashlights, an older man in a dark coat approached briskly. He held up some form of identification, causing the armed intruders to pause. "We have protocols for this," the newcomer said firmly. "No need to frighten civilians. This property belongs to Elijah Cooper, does it not?" Elijah nodded, stunned to see that this man seemed to hold authority over the heavily equipped group. "I'm Dr. David Wilson." The man introduced himself, "And I've known about this site for many years. Your father, Henry Cooper, asked me to keep an eye on things here. Looks like I arrived just in time." In a bizarre turn of events, Elijah and Hannah found themselves inside their farmhouse's living room at 1 a.m, facing Dr. David Wilson and 2 of his associates, both scientists, judging by their equipment and understated manner. The rest of the tactical team remained outside, presumably guarding the newly discovered vault. Tension still coursed through Elijah's veins. The intrusion had been anything but gentle. Yet as he studied Dr. Wilson more closely, a vague recollection surfaced. Wilson had visited Cooper Farm in Elijah's childhood. He had been introduced as an old friend of Elijah's father, Henry. Sitting at the worn wooden table, Dr. Wilson removed his gloves and sighed. "I apologize for the, shall we say, heavy-handed approach. We weren't sure who or what we'd find. I've been monitoring the site remotely ever since Henry Cooper's passing a decade ago. The barn's collapse triggered certain alerts, and we feared infiltration by parties less well-scrupulous." Elijah rubbed his temples. "You're saying my dad knew about what was beneath the barn, but never told me?" Hannah, still shaken, folded her arms awaiting Wilson's explanation. The older man inclined his head. Your father and grandfather and your great-grandfather, of course, were all part of a generational agreement. When Charles Cooper completed his work here, he made a pact with select government and scientific collaborators, among whom I've served for many years. Our job has been to ensure these materials remain safe from misuse. The radiological traces you stumbled upon come from certain experimental isotopes used in pioneering medical and energy research discoveries that were far ahead of their time. He paused, locking eyes with Elijah. Your father intended to bring you into confidence gradually. But as the farm's finances worsened, he grew wary of burdening you with dangerous secrets. Then his health declined. Ultimately, Henry didn't get the chance to explain the vault's significance. Hannah leaned forward. So let me get this straight, Our great-grandfather Charles Cooper wasn't just a farmer. He was part of a clandestine project after World War I, developed advanced technologies or medicines, and decided the best place to hide them was under our barn. Dr. Wilson nodded. Precisely, Charles Cooper was a key figure, a brilliant but unassuming scientist who wanted to ensure his discoveries wouldn't be militarized or exploited for profit. The government at the time had conflicting interests, so Charles took a drastic step. He sealed everything here under a private property shield, trusting his descendants to guard it until a more enlightened generation could put it to ethical use. Elijah listened in stunned silence. The swirl of family lore, hush-hush deals, and advanced science under the farmland he'd toiled for decades left him reeling. The same barn he'd worried over losing sleep about rotting beams and structural instability concealed a trove that might be worth unfathomable sums, monetary and historical. That means the place is still, what, top secret, or are we free to do as we please with it? Wilson's gaze took on a solemn cast. It's complicated. Much of it remains classified, yet the world has changed. We believe the time may be near to reveal at least some aspects of Charles Cooper's research. The question is whether you're willing to help shape how this reintroduction happens while safeguarding your ancestors' legacy. When morning finally broke, a subdued hush lingered over the Cooper property. The tactical team outside had dismantled some of their more imposing gear, but a handful of official-looking vehicles still dotted the driveway. Elijah and Hannah, weary from a night of revelations, faced a flurry of new dilemmas, which documents to share, how to handle the orchard's future, and whether the U.S. government might simply seize everything. In the farmhouse kitchen, its decor still sporting floral wallpaper from the 1970s, Dr. Wilson convened an impromptu meeting. Accompanying him were two others, Dr. Carla Martinez, a medical researcher in her mid-40s, with an expertise in historical biotech, and Agent Peter Horn, a government liaison assigned to ensure operational security. Elijah bristled at the presence of a government agent in his home, but Dr. Wilson reassured him that Horn was there to protect their interests as well as national concerns. I want to be clear. Agent Horn began flipping open a sleek notebook. What we have under that barn is extraordinary, and we can't allow it to become public in a chaotic manner. It's our responsibility to see if the materials pose any immediate risk, biological, radiological, or otherwise. If they do, we must act fast. If not, we need to coordinate carefully how to release or utilize any discoveries. The potential consequences could be huge revolutionary medicine, energy breakthroughs, but also potential misuse, Hannah. Her brow furrowed, tapped a pen against the table. My great-grandfather's notes indicate that the compounds we found, like that antibiotic, were tested extensively, unless there's some hidden supply of untested pathogens. I doubt there's an immediate risk, but I do agree we need experts to confirm that Dr. Martinez gave an appreciative nod. We'll bring in a specialized containment lab. Discreetly, of course, Elijah felt torn. On one hand, if he had cooperated, there was the promise of financial stability. Perhaps the government would compensate the Coopers, or at the very least help rebuild the barn and preserve the orchard. On the other hand, he had a deep-seated distrust. He didn't want to see decades of secret family stewardship undone by bureaucratic meddling. What guarantees do we have that you won't just fence off the entire farm and keep us out of the loop? He asked bluntly. Wilson smiled gently, as if anticipating this question. Your father was a close friend, Elijah. I promised him we'd do this right, honoring Charles Cooper's intent and ensuring your family remains the rightful stewards of this legacy. The government needs allies like you as much as you need resources. With the correct protocols, we can partner with you to bring these dormant technologies and discoveries into the world responsibly. Your orchard and farmland can serve as a legitimate cover, a place where research can continue quietly without public panic or sensationalism. A flicker of hope sparked in Elijah. For so long he'd worried about Cooper Farm's survival. Now, ironically, a top-secret trove beneath the property might secure its future. Hannah exchanged glances with her father. She too seemed intrigued by the possibility of bridging her educational background with this extraordinary inheritance. After a tense silence, Elijah cleared his throat. All right, but I'm not signing away anything without reviewing it carefully. Cooper Farm may be more than just an apple orchard now, but it's still our home. We won't be locked out. Agent Horn gave a measured nod. Understood. We'll draw up preliminary terms of collaboration. In the meantime, we'll conduct thorough scans, check for hazards, and begin evaluating the scientific data. The final decisions will remain in your family's hands, at least to the extent that national security isn't compromised. Outside, the autumn sun shone on the orchard's reddening leaves, the promise of new beginnings rustling through branches that had witnessed more than one generation's quiet dedication. Over the next several weeks, the collapsed barn site transformed into a peculiar blend of construction zone, archaeological dig, and secret research station. Engineers arrived to clear away debris, carefully ensuring no additional damage to the subterranean complex. Helicopters bearing the markings of obscure government agencies flew overhead, delivering specialized equipment discreetly under the cover of night. Meanwhile, Dr. Carla Martinez and her team of medical experts set up a makeshift lab within a newly constructed temporary structure adjacent to the farmhouse. As the vault was cleared for further exploration, new wonders came to light. Elijah and Hannah watched equal parts awed and apprehensive as workers pried open more crates, revealing advanced machinery that defied the technological norms of the early 20th century. One box contained an intricately designed device with coils and tubes labeled electromagnetic field, stabilizer prototype 1923. Another crate revealed glass canisters brimming with shimmering liquids labeled anomaly serums, referencing properties that supposedly could halt cellular decay. Hannah joked it was like stumbling into a real-life episode of The Twilight Zone, except it was all too real. Martinez, sifting through a trove of Charles Cooper's personal lab notebooks, turned to Hannah with genuine admiration. Your great-grandfather was beyond brilliant. These chemical formulas are decades ahead of their time, some even parallel modern nanotech. Hannah smiled sheepishly. He was definitely a better scientist than historian because he left us some big gaps in the documentation. It's like a puzzle missing key pieces. They began comparing the diaries to other newly surfaced documents, hoping to glean a clearer blueprint of just how groundbreaking Charles's work truly was. One morning, while technicians took radiation readings, they uncovered a secondary passage hidden behind a seemingly solid concrete wall. A small lever disguised as part of the structural framework opened a sliding door reminiscent of a submarine hatch. Beyond it lay a narrower corridor leading to a chamber layered with lead shielding. The label on its steel door read simply, Containment Lab, Highest Clearance. Immediately, Agent Horn ordered a pause on all outside personnel entering the area until Dr. Wilson's specialized team could evaluate it. The potential for biological or radioactive hazards was high. In the hush that followed, a sense of gravity settled over everyone on site. All the smaller revelations had been jaw-dropping. Enough miraculous antibiotics, advanced mechanical prototypes, and extensive documentation. But if Charles Cooper had built a containment lab, who knew what might lie inside fear and excitement mingled in Elijah? Part of him wanted to slam that door shut forever and keep this place locked away. Another part felt a moral imperative. If these secrets could help people cure diseases, solve energy crises, then maybe it was time they saw the light of day. Meanwhile, life on the farm's surface continued in its familiar rhythms. Elijah still rose at dawn to feed the animals he had left, check the orchard's progress, and deal with the farm's daily tasks. Yet everything felt irrevocably changed. Each time he trudged past the barn's wreckage, replaced now by a flurry of construction equipment, he was reminded that Cooper Farm was no longer a simple rural homestead. It was an epicenter of a century-old scientific puzzle that could, depending on how it was handled, transform his family's fortunes or end in a meltdown of unimaginable proportions. When the sealed containment lab was finally deemed safe enough to enter, a select group gathered at the threshold. Dr. Wilson, Agent Horn, Dr. Martinez, Elijah, and Hannah, armed with protective gear, though not full hazmat suits, they pushed the heavy steel door open. Inside, bright overhead bulbs flickered to life as a dormant power grid kicked on, revealing a laboratory frozen in time, metal countertops laden with glass apparatus, large cylindrical chambers with gauges and shelves of meticulously labeled flasks. On one wall, a large chalkboard displayed equations and diagrams hinting at advanced energy manipulation. Despite the lab's centuries-old origin, the technology appeared shockingly sophisticated. They advanced cautiously, Dr. Martinez stepped forward, first scanning the environment for airborne pathogens or harmful radiation. The initial readings suggested low but safe levels, possibly remnants from decades-old isotopes used in experiments. In a sealed locker, the group uncovered carefully packaged vials with cryptic names like phase shift serum, cellular regening compound, and bioenergetic catalyst. The futuristic-sounding designations clashed with the lab's dusty 1920s decor. Each discovery reinforced the notion that Charles Cooper and his collaborators had delved into scientific frontiers few contemporaries could have even imagined. At the far end of the lab, large metal cylinders stood in a row. One was open, revealing an interior with thick glass walls, some kind of isolation chamber. Hannah found a logbook resting nearby on a tilted podium. Reading aloud, she described how these chambers had been used for testing human cell resilience under manipulated gravitational fields. No one spoke for a moment. A hush of awe and incredulity lingered. Such advanced concepts were barely on the radar of modern science, let alone feasible in the 1920s. Dr. Wilson's brow furrowed. Charles Cooper and his team were geniuses operating in near secrecy. It's both astonishing and concerning. After several hours cataloging items, they reconvened in the farmhouse kitchen. Agent Horn placed a thick manila folder on the table. We've prepared an initial proposal for your review. Our agencies, think of them as branches of advanced research and development, would like to partner with Cooper Farm in a long-term capacity. We'd classify this place as a secure research site. You and your daughter would remain stewards, of course. Elijah, flipping through the proposal, saw detailed plans for reconstructed buildings, advanced security protocols, and funding allocations for both farm operations and scientific exploration. The numbers were staggering. You'd really invest this much in our orchard and farmland just to keep these experiments going. Agent Horn nodded. To say nothing of potential breakthroughs. The farm would remain operational. We want it to look normal, but beneath the surface, we'd continue unlocking Charles Cooper's secrets. Hannah bit her lip, scanning legal jargon. This is massive, but how do we ensure the research stays ethical? My great-grandfather clearly wanted to prevent these discoveries from being twisted into weapons. Dr. Wilson spoke earnestly. That's exactly why the government needs ethical oversight, and why having a family stake in this descendants of the original genius provides a moral anchor. You can shape how these findings are used. A silent tension filled the room. If they signed, Cooper Farm would be irreversibly bound to a government partnership. The financial stability would be life-changing. The scientific potential, immense. Yet the risks loomed large. One misstep could lead to exploitation. Elijah and Hannah exchanged glances, well aware they were at a crossroads that would define the future of their family and possibly the world beyond. Over the following months, Cooper Farm underwent a transformation, both visible and invisible. On the surface, new construction materials arrived to rebuild the barn. Craftspeople replicated the original design down to its timber, framing, preserving the historic facade. Neighbors driving by saw the old barn resurrected, believing that Elijah must have finally secured some miracle insurance settlement or benefactor. Curiosity buzzed through the community, with rumors ranging from a local historical grant to a wealthy investor looking to brand organic cider under the Cooper Farm label. Behind the scenes, however, security perimeters were quietly established. Cameras were discreetly placed around the property, and motion sensors dotted the perimeter of the orchard. At night, unmarked vehicles slid in to deliver specialized lab equipment that disappeared into the newly reconstructed barn. A hidden freight elevator now led down into the subterranean chambers, facilitating the movement of sensitive materials. Government researchers and contractors came and went on carefully planned schedules to avoid drawing undue attention. Dr. Wilson and Dr. Martinez orchestrated a complex dance of secrecy, aided by Hannah, who balanced her college responsibilities with her new role as a liaison. In time, a special annex was built, adjacent to the orchard, a small facility that outwardly appeared to be a regular agricultural research station. It was officially listed as a partnership with a nearby university, giving Hannah the perfect cover to integrate her studies into the daily operations. Within this annex, advanced computing systems and laboratories analyzed Charles Cooper's diaries, formulas, and prototypes. Hannah marveled at how her life had changed so quickly, moving from worrying about passing finals to worrying about the proper stewardship of top-secret historical technology. Among the earliest breakthroughs to reach a near-finished form was the experimental antibiotic. Dr. Martinez's team worked meticulously to verify its efficacy against antibiotic-resistant bacteria plaguing modern hospitals. Early tests showed astonishing results, far surpassing standard antibiotic treatments. The challenge became how to confirm this discovery on a larger scale without revealing the source of the formula. Layers of red tape and non-disclosure agreements complicated the prospect of releasing a potential medical revolution to the public. Meanwhile, Elijah stood at the cusp of achieving the one thing he'd nearly given up on: saving Cooper Farm from financial ruin. With government backing, his debts vanished, replaced by a generous monthly stipend. Still, he refused to let the orchard become a mere facade. He poured renewed energy into revitalizing the apple trees, upgrading irrigation systems, and testing new organic methods. The orchard thrived, producing some of the sweetest, longest-lasting apples in the county. So long-lasting, in fact, that it raised eyebrows among local produce suppliers. The unexpected storage life of Cooper apples hinted at the underlying secret. Some of Charles Cooper's preservation techniques had quietly found their way into orchard management. True to her inquisitive nature, Hannah proposed an outreach program. "We can't reveal the subterranean labs," she told Dr. Wilson, "but we might conduct legitimate agricultural research up here and share partial results. It would bolster the farm's reputation, honestly." Wilson agreed, seeing value in building good faith in the region, so they launched limited workshops teaching small-scale farmers about soil fertility, orchard care, and experimental ways to reduce pest infestation naturally. Attendees marveled at the rapid, healthy growth of Cooper Farm's trees. None suspected the deeper reason: traces of technology that could, if unleashed, alter the entire agricultural industry. At times, Elijah still felt pangs of disquiet. The partnership was going smoothly, almost too smoothly. Was the government waiting for the right moment to clamp down, extracting the final secrets without regard for the Cooper family's moral stance? Dr. Wilson's reassurance and Henry Cooper's old letters, which Elijah discovered hidden in a family desk, alleviated his fears somewhat. In those letters, Henry had written how Dr. Wilson had the best interests of our family at heart, and how, if anyone can blend caution with courage, it'll be David. Those words offered Elijah a slender thread of trust as he carried on a farmer, preserving not just apples, but a line of scientific wonders the world had yet to fully comprehend. By the one-year anniversary of the barn's collapse, Cooper Farm exuded a vibrancy it hadn't seen in decades, maybe ever. The new barn, a picture-perfect reconstruction, commanded the horizon with its red-painted boards and cupola, much like the original, but with thoroughly modern structural supports hidden beneath. The orchard, flush with healthy trees and record-setting yields, attracted renewed local attention. Tourism picked up, with curious families coming to buy fresh cider apple pies and artisanal jams straight from the farm store that Hannah had managed to open. On the surface, all seemed blissful, a picturesque vision of New England charm. Beneath the orchard's manicured rows of apple trees, however, lay the real marvel. Under the official partnership with Dr. Wilson's group, revealed simply as university collaborators to outsiders, secret labs churned with activity. Researchers delved into Charles Cooper's advanced frameworks for energy generation, including a design for what appeared to be an early prototype of a quantum battery. Hannah joked that if any orchard in America ran on quantum technology, it had to be theirs. The antibiotic project moved forward steadily. Dr. Martinez coordinated with select medical institutions under strict confidentiality, running clinical trials that hinted at a paradigm shift in modern medicine. For Elijah, these developments felt both exhilarating and surreal. No longer was he the beleaguered farmer struggling to keep the lights on. He oversaw a dynamic enterprise, part family farm, part advanced research hub. Yet he remained a farmer at heart, rising before dawn to check the orchard, note changes in the weather, and ensure that the day-to-day tasks of feeding livestock and maintaining machinery never fell by the wayside. Old habits of stewardship die hard. He found that the more progress the labs made, the more he cherished the earthly scent of soil and the routine of orchard life. Hannah, splitting time between campus and the farm, decided to transfer her major focus to agricultural innovation, with a minor in history. Her professors supported her unique arrangement, intrigued but unaware of the magnitude of her family project. On weekends, she organized small agricultural seminars at Cooper Farm, bringing in local farmers to discuss sustainability and climate adaptation. The orchard became a proving ground for techniques like integrated pest management, enhanced composting, and even microdosing with natural amendments, gleaned from Dr. Martinez's less classified research. The orchard's harvest soared with apples that consistently outlasted competing varieties on store shelves, pest-free and boasting exceptional flavor. Local grocery chains took notice, awarding Cooper Farm prime display space and driving renewed revenue into the region's economy. Over time, carefully managed news leaks hinted at a lost trove of early 20th century research discovered on a Vermont farm, fueling quiet murmurs in the academic community. Speculation ran wild. Were these rumored documents real? And if so, what had they revealed? A few conspiracy theories circled online forums, hypothesizing hidden government labs, alien technologies, or secret societies. Amused, Hannah sometimes browsed these forums late at night, comforted by how no one had pinpointed the truth with any accuracy. In fact, the public's imagination spun such wild tales that the real story about a humble farm and a visionary scientist from the 1920s, it remained ironically credible only to those directly involved. A crucial test of the antibiotic arrived in early spring. Dr. Martinez's team submitted research under a pseudonym to a reputable medical journal describing a novel synthetic compound that eradicated drug-resistant bacteria in lab cultures. The study's results rocked the scientific community, even without the full backstory. Calls flooded in for follow-up investigations. Pharmaceutical executives quietly expressed interest in acquiring the rights even without details on the compound's origin. Agent Horn and Dr. Wilson insisted on caution, reminding everyone of Charles Cooper's mission: beneficial use without letting corporate greed or militarization overshadow humanitarian ends. Feeling the weight of her ancestors' legacy, Hannah pressed for a new directive. "We need an ethics committee or something like it to guide how we release technology," she argued. "Otherwise, we might repeat the mistakes Charles Cooper worked so hard to avoid." Elijah nodded in agreement. They pitched the idea to Dr. Wilson, proposing a council composed of ethicists, public health experts, environmental scientists, and even a representative from local farming communities. The notion was well received, eventually taking form as the Cooper Ethical Advancement Council, CEAAC. With the SAC in place, the farm began a cautious rollout of certain discoveries. Preliminary papers were published on advanced orchard management, attributing the breakthroughs to historical research integrated with modern science. A vague statement that satisfied academic curiosity, but omitted mention of quantum fields or near-magical compounds. Emboldened by these successes, Hannah dreamed of the day they might unveil Charles Cooper's blueprint for zero-waste energy production. If harnessed properly, that alone could alleviate an array of global environmental problems. But each step had to be measured. The council debated projected possible outcomes and insisted on slow, incremental releases. Elijah, leaning on the new barn door one breezy summer afternoon, watched as a group of local high school students toured the orchard. The kids snapped pictures on their phones, thrilled to taste test apples straight from the trees. Standing beside him, Dr. Wilson wore a relaxed expression for perhaps the first time in months. "Your great-grandfather would be proud." "I believe," he said quietly. Elijah wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. "You're certain. Sometimes I feel like we're meddling in things beyond our grasp." Dr. Wilson patted Elijah's shoulder. "Charles Cooper always believed in bridging scientific marvels with down-to-earth practicality. You're doing just that, ensuring the orchard thrives while the world gradually learns what's hidden below." Balance was his watchword, and it's yours too. The evening sky blushed with hues of pink and lavender. As the tour ended, Hannah joined them, a thoughtful smile on her face. She held a well-worn leather journal recently unearthed from among Charles Cooper's personal effects. It was different from the lab diaries, more personal, revealing glimpses of the man behind the science. He wrote, "Progress is worthless unless it nurtures life as the farm nurtures its seedlings." Hannah read. Tears glistened at the corners of her eyes. "We have a mission, Dad, one that was entrusted to us a century ago. We can't fail him." Elijah gently placed an arm around her shoulders. In a single year that had gone from fearing bankruptcy to orchestrating one of the most astonishing scientific revivals imaginable, all under the unassuming banner of a family farm. The rising moon reflected off the new barn roof, highlighting fresh timber that symbolized renewal. The orchard trees swayed in the breeze, their fruit nearly ready for harvest. And below, unknown to the casual observer, lay a labyrinth of chambers and labs still brimming with undisclosed innovations, each carefully guarded until the time was right to share them. In that moment, father and daughter understood they stood on the precipice of a new era. Their footsteps in the orchard passed along the same paths once trod by Charles Cooper nearly 100 years ago. His message written in diaries etched into hidden lab notes and now woven into the soul of Cooper Farm was that technology and tradition could converge without losing the human touch. As the day's last light faded, Elijah tipped his hat to the memory of his great-grandfather. The old barn had collapsed, but in its place rose a future more promising than any of them had dared to dream. In the end, Cooper Farm became more than a piece of land. It became a testament to American resilience, ingenuity, and the timeless values of family loyalty. Elijah and Hannah Cooper transformed their legacy into something extraordinary, showing us that innovation doesn't have to sacrifice tradition or common sense. They stood firm against corporate greed and political secrecy, choosing instead to protect their community, honor their ancestors, and share life-changing discoveries responsibly. What would you do if you discovered a hidden legacy beneath your own home? Do you think Elijah and Hannah handled their incredible discovery the right way? Share your thoughts and stories below, and let's keep the conversation alive. And remember to subscribe for more gripping, untold American stories that celebrate courage, family values, and the everyday heroes among us.